One of the advantages of having a ministry plan for everyone from the lead pastor or the ministry leader down to the quote lowliest servant, if you will, is that you've got an opportunity to clearly establish expectations, but now you also have a basis for giving feedback. One of the most important things, I think, is to have a candid feedback session with the people that are doing the work on a regular basis. What are the expectations? How are you doing against those expectations? Are you clear? Are we on the same page insofar as what those expectations are like? And then having a reasonable discussion as to what degree those expectations are being met. So if each individual has got a sense of these are the ministry results we're trying to achieve, and these are the behaviors that need to be demonstrated in order to achieve them, and here's my development plan, this is what I'm doing to get even better. If everyone has those things clearly identified, now a basis exists for giving good, candid feedback. Many times when we communicate expectations without this kind of a basis, without a formal plan, we communicate roughly. And then we judge people for not doing what we expected them to do, when in fact the communication was not clear, it was not decoded as it was intended to be sent, and we can run into all kinds of difficulty there. In fact, there's the idea of huge confrontation taking place because this person isn't doing what I want them to do. Well, that person probably isn't staying awake nights trying to figure out how to subvert what you asked them to do. They probably misunderstood. There are a couple reasons why expectations are not being met. One of them has to do with lack of skill. One of them has to do with lack of effort. And a lot of it has to do with poorly communicated expectations, confusing expectations, or constantly shifting expectations. So one of the important things to do is to clearly identify, are we on the same page? So I'd like to offer a bit of a template for giving feedback. When expectations are met, we give feedback by comparing what was expected with what was actually achieved. Again, what was expected is compared with what was actually achieved. Now here's the thing, most feedback where expectations are being met is in the form of, you're doing a good job, I appreciate what you're doing, keep up the good work, those kinds of things. Amazingly general and really not very gratifying for the individual. But if you've communicated, here's what I expect you to do, and here's what I see you doing, and it's exactly right, now you're doing a good job. That comes clear. That's through. That message is getting through. And it reinforces the specific behaviors that we're wanting to encourage so that ministry results are being achieved. Now, if expectations are being met, as I said, you always compare the expectations with the actual. When expectations are not being met, you also compare the expectations with the actual. But I'd like to offer this bit of a template, if you will. So expectations are not being met. You're the supervisor here. You've communicated, you've worked with this individual. You thought you communicated expectations and things of that nature, but you're not quite seeing the results or the behaviors that you thought you would get after you made this, after you communicated these expectations. So I'd like to offer this template. It is the you, me, it, us template. So the you is, let's sit down, talk about expectations. Help me understand what your view of the expectations is. And listen, they're going to tell you what they believe the expectations that you communicated to them are. So just listen. That's the you part. You communicate to me what you believe the expectations to be. The next thing of the you, me, it, us is the me part, and that's where I get to say, well, here's what my view of the expectations are, and you clearly identify them. And if expectations have not been met, then literally by definition there's going to be a gap between their understanding of the expectations and your understanding of the expectations. Now that gap needs to be clearly defined and discussed and talked through. Then the us part is, here's what we might do so that expectations might be met. Now, here's one of the interesting things that takes place. Many times we associate the gap in the meeting of the expectations with the individual, and we'll approach it with things like this. You're not doing the job that I asked you to do, or you blew it. That's not what we were looking for. That's wrong. No, that's not right. That immediately puts people on the defensive. What we're wanting to do with the you, me, and us is investigate their understanding, their interpretation of the events that are producing activities. And what we need to do now is to say, let's come alongside and talk about the expectations. So now we're looking at the expectations together. First, their understanding of the expectations, and then second, your understanding of the expectations and what degree of difference there might be. All right, now I mentioned a moment ago there are a couple of opportunities for expectations not to be met. One of them has to do with skill. They just flat out don't know how. And the question is, can we complete that gap by training them? The second thing has to do with effort. Are they fully engaged? Do they really want to be doing this particular job, or were they coerced? The old arm twisting method. I need somebody to do this job. Please, 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 please. It'll only be for 6 weeks, and then it's a 3-year type of a commitment. You understand that. You've probably been there. The important thing then is effort. Can we get them doing the right thing? Can we get them complying? That's a question you've got to have, and that conversation is important to have. And then the third thing usually is, are the expectations clearly understood? Were they clearly communicated? Now, of course, there are other reasons why expectations aren't been met. One of them has to do with team issues. I don't like the person that you're making me work with. That could be something. Another thing could be where we've got some issues at home. A lot of times we attribute the lack of meeting expectations with the individual, and it has to do with their circumstance. It's just not possible for them to do these kinds of things. And then we judge them harshly for not doing them, when in fact there are circumstances, and it has nothing to do with their spiritual maturity or commitment to the vision. Life happens. So there are a variety of reasons why expectations aren't being met. The important thing is to talk through them and investigate them, and to do that in a safe manner, one where people have good conversations. So let's review. One of the advantages of having a written performance plan is that there's conversation that is taking place about what those expectations are. If expectations are being met, and we compare always the expectation with actual, give feedback. That's exactly what we're looking for. This is the behavior that I've seen. You're greeting people really well. You've got a smiley face. You're warm. You're gracious. You're not intimidating. It's just right. This is what it looks like. That's what we're expecting from our greeters, if you will, or our ushers. Those are exactly the behaviors that we're looking for. Another thing then is when expectations are not being met, what is the expectation? What is the actual? What's the gap in between? And that starts by having a conversation around clearly understanding the expectations. You, me, and us. Do you understand what my expectations are? Because really mine are the ones that count here, if you will. And what gap might be between your understanding and my understanding, and then what might we do as a team to move you back to a circumstance where expectations are in fact being met. So use the model of giving feedback frequently, where you're comparing the expectations with the actual, and then where expectations are being met, give feedback that is positive, again by comparing those two, and where expectations are not being met, have a candid conversation that is sincere, to the point, and with them in mind to produce the results that we're trying to produce. Blessings on you now as you do kingdom work. And this is really where the rubber is going to hit the road, is in meeting these kinds of expectations.